And as two blokes here in the studio, can we say blokes?
Yeah,
Is that offensive?
Yeah, we're going back to blokes.
Two blokes in the studio. We've sort of, in different ways, but both within the realms of journalism, have been round the block, yourself in print and me in broadcasting. I've
been round the block several times.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you're right. You've got 35 years on me, Kev. All right, I'll give you that.
However, thanks. Yeah, sure.
However, we were talking about this in the office, weren't we? The change of what is acceptable or seen as acceptable in terms of what you can say, can't say, what is correct, not correct, what terms you need to change, what areas of life you can talk about, where you can smile, where you can't smile, where a joke is not a joke. I mean, the list goes on. It's just somebody's rewritten a big old rule book here and nobody actually can find the book.
Well, the offices I tend to work in today compared to the ones I worked in at the start of my career, particularly on Fleet Street in the 80s, there's no comparison. No comparison. I mean,
can you not use the word Fleet Street, by the way? Because some people might be sensitive because they might have flashbacks to a different kind of era.
A vile era.
We've got lots of very sensitive listeners who might be listening thinking,
so I do apologise.
Fleet Street. I can remember the time I was doorstep because I got drunk and slept with 3 people all on the same night. So
I apologise if you were offended.
You might be offended by that, and this is the problem. Students, the one group, I can't get my head around this, the one group, Kev, that you would think intellectually would not be offended because the whole thing is all about debate, polarity, discourse, all of that, where uncomfortable opinions, and nothing ever got solved in this entire journey of life without one or two uncomfortable realities or opinions coming forward. But it's campus and the like that has really been at the centre of this story.
I mean, I've based my career on being offensive, so it's bad news that it's not allowed anymore. Speaking of which, the practice of no platforming controversial speakers at British universities could be outlawed by the government unless academic institutions adopt unambiguous guidelines that protect freedom of speech. In a stern warning, Education Secretary Gavin Williamson declared war on militant students, banning guest speakers and debaters whose opinions they don't like. In an article in today's Times, Mr. Williamson also insists that literature and organisations must not be suppressed by safe space policies. And if universities don't ensure free speech and threatening behaviour against people that the students don't like must be ended as well. If they don't take measures to stop all this, the tough-talking minister says the government will. Joining us now is the editor of Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. Happy days with this announcement by Mr. Williamson. Yes, Brendan?
I think it's a very welcome intervention, and it's about time someone high up took it very seriously, the fact that we have this crisis of freedom on campus, and it's become incredibly difficult to hold certain views and to express certain views in the one area of life where you would expect that all views could be aired and all views could be debated and all ideas could be pored over and questioned and ridiculed and discussed. So I think I'm not 100% convinced that government intervention is the solution to this. I think that could turn it into a bit of an authoritarian exercise in itself. I would much prefer if there was a revolt on campus itself between academics and students who do still believe in freedom of speech. But for the time being, given that things have gone so horribly wrong in universities, I think it's welcome that the minister is speaking out about this.
What's your impression of the people behind these safe space policies and no platforming? How numerous are they at universities? Is it just a small caucus of loudmouths who are actually overriding the opinions, the more reasonable opinions of the vast majority of students?
Yes, I think it is. It's a minority, and most students just get on with their student life and study and get their degree and then move on. So it is a minority. I think there's a class dynamic as well. When I speak at universities all the time, the universities I have most trouble in are the really posh ones, the kind of, the Ivy League, as they would call them in the US, Oxford, Cambridge, Durham, those kinds of places. If you go to the red brick universities, the newer kind of post-1960s universities, which have large numbers of working class students, it's less of a problem. So I think there's a sense of entitlement among some of these kind of raging snowflakes who want to shut everyone down. But I think the culture that they're expressing is a serious culture of intolerance to any kind of anyone who dissents from the woke agenda, anyone who questions political correctness, anyone who questions transgenderism. If you question any of these modern-day orthodoxies, they will rage against you in a fairly hysterical way.
But bearing in mind, universities, Brendan, are supposedly the sort of epicenter of debate, and debating societies exist in most universities. And one would have thought of all the specific groups of people in society that might understand, and that understanding should, but clearly isn't, being encouraged by lecturers and the like, who perhaps are part of the problem as well. That this is, it's all about divergence in terms of opinion. And we're now in this curious situation where people like Jermaine Greer, Linda Bellos, your old colleague Claire Fox, people like that are person non grata. I mean, because these mostly left-wingers in that list that I gave there are not left-wing enough, it seems. When Linda Bellos isn't left-wing enough, there's something gone horribly wrong, isn't there?
Absolutely, and I think it's really the transgenderism issue really sums it up, because what we have now, we have largely female academics or invited female speakers being absolutely shouted down and screamed down, often by people who were born male. So there's a really, in my view, a misogynistic dynamic to this. There's a professor at the University of Sussex right now, Kathleen Stock. There's also a professor at Oxford, Selina Todd. These are people who simply want to say that there is such a thing as biological sex, that there are such a thing as men and women, and a man cannot become a woman. He can, do what he likes. He can change his name. He can put on a dress. He can take hormonal drugs, but he will never really be a woman. I think they are absolutely ought to have the right to say that. They ought to have the right to express what I think many, many people would agree with them on. But instead, what's happening is they're being hounded, they're being harassed, they're being demonized. They need armed guards on campus sometimes to protect them from these kind of raging students. That's a serious problem, and that's just one example of an issue around which the woke lobby has put this kind of force field and is denying any form of criticism or debate at all.
Aren't the university authorities to blame, the people who run the universities? How have they allowed this situation to get so badly out of hand? And I'm assuming, I agree with you, I wouldn't want to see the government cracking down with laws, but it's about time the people who run the universities were warned that they've got to stamp down on this nonsense.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because there is a tendency, and I fall for this tendency myself sometimes, there is a tendency to blame it all on these kind of 19-year-old idiots with blue hair who've read far too much feminist theory and who just want to shoot everyone down if they don't agree with them. I think those people are a problem, but I think their universities are allowing them to do this and often sending them the signal that it's okay to shut people down. I mean, a very good example, I was banned from speaking at Oxford University in 2014. It was a debate about abortion, and the Feminist Society decided that because I don't have a uterus, I shouldn't be allowed to speak on this issue. And the university authorities at Christ Church College in Oxford, the university authorities agreed with the students and cancelled the debate. And that happens quite a lot. What happens often on campuses is that the intolerant students kick up a fuss, and the university management itself caves into them and agrees to stop someone from coming to campus. So universities themselves have a lot to answer for. They are failing to uphold academic freedom.
You need to alter your Wikipedia entry to say "does have a uterus," and maybe that will the speaking circuit will open up to you, Brendan. I promise you,
cover all the bases
like never before.
I identify as having a uterus,
there you
and
go.
it's your right to do so. There you go.